Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of TASB Talks, the podcast bringing you the latest happenings and insights into Texas public education. I'm your host, Matt Mitchell, Senior Communications Specialist here at TASB, and I am joined once again by my colleague, Kelly Rasti, Associate Executive Director of TASB Governmental Relations. Kelly, how are you?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've had you on, I feel like. It's been...
I do believe that's correct, but I have a horrible sense of time and my calendar is wonky, so don't trust me on that one.
It's that time of the year when the weeks are all running together anyway, but we have a lot to catch up on, I understand, don't we?
We do, and I'm trying, Matt, I'm focusing. I'm trying really hard to not make this unnecessarily long. I know we try to be succinct and get as much as we can in a short period of time, but there is a lot happening.
There is. Hey, don't let the format of this show constrain you in any way. I want you to speak your mind, and we have a lot to get through. You're right. And right now, I believe SBOE is meeting as we speak. You were following that before we got on the show here. So what's new with that meeting? What can you tell us?
So much going on as we speak. As you said, I've got a tab on my laptop open, just kind of keeping an eye on it, which is kind of silly now that I think about it. I can't read their lips, so I really don't know what they're doing. But I'm keeping an eye on it right now.
You don't have captions or like subtitles or anything?
You know what? Let me glance. No, I do not. That would be helpful, though. So there's still a lot that's going to happen. Today is what, Thursday?
Thursday, the 20th.
Yeah, so they meet over multiple days. So we won't know the full impact of all the decisions that they make until the end of the full meeting tomorrow. But so far, a couple of things that I've really focused on is one, there is a new requirement by legislation that passed in spring in the last legislative session that will require the state board to develop a new training for trustees. So this is definitely one for our folks to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. This
one is going to relate to parental rights. And I was hoping that I could get an update right before we got on here, but it's still underway. So I'm not sure, what's worth sharing at this moment. Nothing concrete. There's still more work to do, but this is definitely something that our folks are going to want to follow as it develops. So we will definitely push out information as we know more. Yesterday, something that was new-ish to me came up. It really shouldn't have been new, to be honest, but it's something that I forgot about over the past 3 years since this new requirement came into place. So back in 2021, we had a couple of special sessions, just like we did this year. And there was a bill in the second, I believe, special session, Senate Bill 3, that included a number of different things. But one item that's tucked in there is a required civics training for certain teachers. And there's a due date when that has to go into effect. And it just so happens to be by the next school year, by 2025-26 school year. So the state agency, the Texas Education Agency, was presenting an update to the State Board of Education yesterday. And it all started to ring a bell for me. I remember that requirement. It just 2021 feels so long ago.
That is really impressive that you have that off the top of your head.
Well, now I do after I dove into it last night. So there will be, this is my best understanding from what was discussed in the meeting yesterday. There will be a required training for most schools in Texas, most public schools, this summer, where one teacher and one administrator from each campus will need to take this in-person training for civics programs. I spoke with a couple of State Board of Education members to try to get more information. And so what I understand as of right now is that this is most likely to be a 2-day training, 12 hours over the 2 days during the summer. And my first question was, is there funding for it? If folks who are listening might recall, a couple of years ago, we had the reading academies roll out. And that was difficult for teachers who were required to sit for that training. Now, granted, that was many more hours than what this one appears to be, but there was difficulty with requiring more of teachers and not having adequate funding or stipends available to compensate them for their time. It was a pretty hotly debated issue at the time. A great training overall, but just the logistics of deploying it was tricky. So my understanding from the agency is that they've been working hard to learn from that experience and have a smoother rollout. There was a budget rider from 2021 that funds this and will make stipends available for teachers. So it sounds like this will have a much smoother rollout than some things we've seen in the past. So that's on the way. And then tons of other things going on, not least of which is the social studies framework and update to the TEKS. That probably won't be wrapped up and settled until June. So I think that right now, as I have my tab open, I think they are discussing that again as we speak.
Well, we will certainly be keeping our eye on that over the next few days. And in the meantime, why don't we jump over to the Texas Education Agency? They recently released an update to the accountability system, did they not?
Yes, pretty much. They released a proposed refresh plan to update the A through F accountability system, basically. And so before I even get into some of those details, I definitely want to make note of the fact that it is open right now for public comment, and they're leaving the window of public comment open for months. So this is a good opportunity for you and your colleagues in school districts to take a look at that refresh proposal. And if you have any recommendations, the agency is seeking those out right now. So make sure you get that in when you can. Also on that note, the TEA is hosting multiple webinars. There are a couple coming up in December to run through some of the changes. So if you're interested in diving into this refresh proposal, I would definitely plug in now. This is the time to do that. But one thing that caught my eye with that accountability refresh is it's kind of twofold. There was a rule change earlier this year that adjusted IBCs, our industry-based certifications list. So we went from previously having, I think, over about 300 IBCs to now having more than 500. However, with these new rule changes earlier this year, each IBC is now going to be placed into a tier. And I believe it's 3 tiers. And that is going to qualify an IBC by ranking it on the value of that certification and the rigor and how it really translates into something useful in the workforce. So what I understand is that the tiers exist for the IBCs now after that rule change. However, they won't be used in any way for accountability ratings for A through F until possibly 2028, when changes to the A through F system will go into effect. That's part of what we need to be looking at right now and submitting comments and recommendations on. Within that proposal, the refresh proposal, there are some areas that aren't fully detailed, but you can see that the goal with this proposal is to change how we score CCMR, which is college, career, and military readiness, particularly for career when we talk about IBCs. So right now, the IBCs essentially count for a point in CCMR for career ready. If we look at what's happened with tiers and we look at what is in the proposal for the refresh, it appears that certain IBCs, if they're tiered lower, will not count for a full credit for CCMR, which leads me to believe that this will impact school decisions on which pathways you choose to provide to students. It might impact students needing to stack IBCs to get a full CCMR credit, a full career readiness credit. And I've heard from a few smaller districts who are communicating on their own with the agency and submitting comments that have concerns about accessibility to certain IBCs and to certain programs. So I know they're receiving solid feedback that will hopefully go into account when the final refresh is adopted. But this will be impactful. And I think that folks need to take the time that they have right now, which is limited. You have a few months to make comments or to provide comments. I think that most school districts really need to dig into the details, review it, determine how that's going to impact you locally, and send your feedback soon.
So some other big news that has come out in the last week or so, Governor Abbott announced property tax relief priorities. So what can you tell us about these and how do they relate to Texas public schools?
Yeah, this is hot off the press, I think. So I made a list of exactly what they are so I don't misspeak. So I'm going to read these to you. There's about 6 that he announced. So he's kicking off his reelection campaign, and this was part of his plan for reducing property taxes for all Texans. Number 1, limit local government spending increases to the lesser of population plus inflation or 3.5%. Number 2, require 2/3 voter approval on all local property tax increases. Number 3, allow 15% of registered voters to force a tax rate rollback election by petition. Number 4, limit property appraisals to once every 5 years. Number 5, lower the homestead appraisal cap from 10 to 3% and then extend the cap to businesses as well. And finally, allow voters to decide whether to eliminate school district property taxes altogether. So this is a new announcement. We saw folks who are listening will probably recognize a few of these concepts as items that were tucked into certain bills this past legislative session. There is a lot to unpack there. It feels a little bit early to get too deep into it because we're in the middle of so many campaigns that are heating up, and we haven't started any interim hearings yet. However, I would imagine that we will see some of these items on one or both of the House or Senate's interim charges. And so perhaps we will see these come up in conversations in interim hearings. What I think that school folks need to know is that a lot of these directly impact you. So we need to be watching this closely, and we really need the details in order to form an opinion or to provide really meaningful feedback, because some of these concepts you can give feedback already and kind of estimate what the impact would be, but some of them really depends on the details. The devil's in the details.
So let's zoom back out to the federal level now. Now that the government shutdown is over, what should we in the public education world be keeping our eyes on?
There's so much in that space, and I promised I'm going to try to be succinct. So I made a few notes of things that I think we need to have on our radar. I'm sure folks have seen in the news that the U.S. Department of Education is looking to move some of its programs and departments to other agencies. And so we did see that they announced 6 new interagency agreements within the past couple of days where they're moving programs to 4 other agencies. So for example, the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education is moving to the Department of Labor. We've been checking in to see what the status is with the Office of Special Education. There's been a lot of conversation about that moving over to Health and Human Services. So far, nothing official, but staff is still saying that that is the plan. So we will keep an eye on that. This is new, or an update from yesterday, I should say. HR 2259 is the National Strategy for School Security Act. It just passed the House yesterday, I believe. So it's heading over to the Senate. This bill requires Homeland Security to develop and then submit to Congress a national school security strategy. And that would serve as a framework to basically coordinate federal efforts that work to secure elementary and secondary schools nationwide. So one thing that I pulled from that is the strategy that's tucked into the bill would require identification of specific school security vulnerabilities to shootings and acts of terrorism within the United States, and then it delineates goals for how you actually close those vulnerabilities. So that seems to have some legs. I would recommend that folks who are watching and have a particular interest in school safety, which is hopefully everyone, that they reach out to their congressional leaders and ask about it. Do some digging to look into the bill yourself. We will include some information in our upcoming legislative report if you're signed up for those emails. The original sponsor in the House is Congressman Tony Gonzalez. I imagine you can always reach out to his office to get a briefing as well. But that's one item that's high on our list right now to keep tracking. And then there's a plethora, I would say, of pieces of legislation that address AI, artificial intelligence, in the classroom in particular. So there are more than just these 2 bills, but I'm going to mention 2 in particular that I think folks might want to take a look at and track. So there's one that Congressman Cassidy filed. We're calling it the Life with AI Act, the Learning, Innovation, and Empowerment with AI Act. This one focuses on upgrading student privacy and parental choice. So back in October, though, Senators Hawley and Blumenthal held a press conference to announce other AI legislation that we're calling, this is going to be a lot of words. This is what we do with bills. We name them something that can have a nice acronym. So this one is the GUARD Act. This is Guidelines for User Age Verification and Responsible Dialogue.
Okay, that's an okay acronym.
It comes right off the tongue.
Yeah.
I would really like to be involved in naming certain bills and finding a good acronym for it.
That could be a full-time job right there.
I'm just throwing it out there. If anyone needs help, I would like to be a part of this. So that one would require AI chatbots to implement age verification measures. I think a lot of folks have probably heard in the news recently some horror stories of things that have happened with students and adults too, probably, but with students engaging with chatbots and just some really alarming dialogue occurring. So back to Senator Cassidy's bill, though, that bill, the Life with AI Act, would create a golden seal of excellence for student data privacy, and it would establish a privacy technical assistance center at the U.S. Department of Education. Not exactly sure personally how that works if we're actively dismantling the Department of Education and moving things out, but I guess we'll track that and we'll see how it goes. One thing that school districts should be watching with this one, with Cassidy's Life with AI Act, is that it would include, or it does include, provisions that mandate that parents have the opportunity to review all third-party education technology contracts with school districts before they're implemented. And it would require districts to make those contracts publicly available no less than 2 weeks in advance of a contract's execution. So full disclosure, I have not spoken with school district officials yet to see about that provision. If that flows well with their operations, that is something that I will follow up on, but I wanted to flag it for folks who are listening. And then back to the GUARD Act of 2025. That one is aimed really squarely at those chatbots and trying to establish access and use restrictions for minors. And we're clocking minors as 18 or younger. So all manufacturers of AI chatbots would have to prevent minor access and usage, basically. So those are two AI related to school bills that I think not only trustees and superintendents, but I think parents might want to be taking a close look at and tracking. Tons of other things going on, but that was the best summary that I could do of some key items that we're watching right now that we're opened back up.
Well, Kelly, it was a great update. You gave us a lot of great information, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. And as always, we very much appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And I know that we're going to have you back on in a few weeks for a very special episode, aren't we?
Yes, we're going to be here with a special guest too.
And hopefully it'll feel a lot more like the holidays and not like summer like it has felt lately.
It needs to, because regardless, I'm going to start dressing that way, and I'm going to start wearing Christmas earrings and the like. So I'm bringing the weather to us.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And again, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all the listeners for tuning in as always. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you so much, and have a good one.